Welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast, a podcast for creatives. I'm your host, Tammy Takeishi. Join me for compelling conversations with artists, actors, authors, musicians, and other creatives about the impact of the creative and fine arts in their lives and our ever-changing world. Thank you for listening. Hello and welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast. Today I am with Chad Boudreaux. He is an author of thrillers, but he has a broad range of government, legal, and corporate experience. Prior to serving as the Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer of the nation's largest military shipbuilder, he served as Deputy Chief of Staff for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, where he advised Secretary Michael Chertoff on almost all significant matters facing the newly established department. Prior to that, he served in high-ranking positions at the U.S. Justice Department, and he writes about government, and it inspired him in his debut Scavenger Hunt, which came out in 2023, and he has the newest novel, Homecoming Queen, which recently came out. So I'm very excited to talk about his career and his pivot to writing, which leads to the first question, which is who or what inspired you to go into your field and then later decide to write about it as an author?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I think my inspiration for becoming a lawyer was that I couldn't do anything else. I was not good at science. I was not good at math. And so as a matter of survival, I said, I better find something to put food on the table. So I always liked arguing, although I probably didn't win a whole lot. But that kind of led me to a career in wanting to pursue the law. And I became a lawyer, and the rest is history. The writing part was an outgrowth of having an opportunity within my professional career working for the Department of Justice. I was hired the night before the September 11 attacks. I was living in Texas at the time and moved up several weeks later. And literally my wife and I lived one block away from the Supreme Court. We had a Great Dane named Judge, who's the only real character in Scavenger Hunt. And the energy behind the city and what we observed was so fascinating and macabre in a sense too. But nobody had ever been in a situation like that. The city certainly never experienced anything like that, and that really inspired me to start writing fiction.
That's wonderful. And I love that you were able to, not only you had a passion and you worked hard in your career, but then you turned that into writing. And I haven't had a chance to read Scavenger Hunt, but I've read some of Homecoming Queen, and I love thrillers. And I mean, you're just a natural. You're just a natural at it, so it's fabulous.
Well, thank you. If I find a story that I like and it comes to me, then I really have to see it through. And so with thrillers, as you know, you have to start early and hold the reader to the very end. And hopefully in both of the books, we've accomplished that.
Yeah. And that's a hard thing to do because I enjoy writing, but I'm more of a romance, rom-com type person. And that's a completely different level of engagement and pacing and everything like that. What are some things that you find are easy and what are some things you find difficult about writing?
Well, just mechanically, the discipline behind writing is the hard part. I actually, for whatever reason, and knock on wood, I'm not one that suffers from writer's block too often. It does happen from time to time, but writing is not my main job. I do it on the side. I treat it like it's my job when I have time to do it, and I make time in the mornings. But I think just character development for anybody is maybe not the hardest, but the most important thing. Mm-hmm. You come up with a good story, and if your characters fall flat, then your story's going to fall flat. And so even now, I'm writing my third book, and I have a note jot down next to me that says, there are a couple of characters that I'm not sure the reader is going to fully understand because I haven't taken them from my mind onto the page. And so it's really enhancing the characters and making sure that the ones that actually have names that are crucial to the story, they also have personalities.
I love that. And, in addition to thriller, obviously you probably enjoy reading that genre, but what are other books that you enjoy reading and authors that inspire you or maybe even just seep into your subconscious in terms of writing?
Yeah, so for the spy thrillers that I enjoyed, I gravitate to spy thrillers, and I think Scavenger Hunt is largely in that genre. There are, Robert Ludlum was one that I really fell in love with. The Bourne movies are great, but the books are even better. And the way he wrote was very inspiring to me. As far as character development goes, I don't know anybody better than Stephen King. And his book on writing is still kind of like the handbook. Like I
Oh,
go
yeah.
through and next to my character development note that I have, there's also a note, take out all the adverbs that you can. And that comes straight from Stephen King. And so there are certain books. I like Stephen King's non-horror better than his horror, but his non-horror, I forget, like the Gunslinger series. I think it's the fourth book, and I can't remember the name of it. I should, but it's actually got the best love romantic chapters I've read of any book, and I don't read romance novels at all. But he said at the beginning of that book that was intimidating to me, and I went down that path anyway, and I hope I did okay. And I remember like clinging to every page, like what's going to happen with this relationship. And so anyway, overcoming challenges like that, I think, is good for us. And Stephen King does a great job. I do read nonfiction. I like historical fiction as well. And so like Devil in the White City, those kinds of books, Caleb Carr's books. I know he just recently passed away, but The Angel of Darkness and The Alienist, fantastic. The writing is so rich. And then Mark Helprin on the nonfiction side, the the um, the forget the Ant Proof Case, the memoir from an Ant Proof Case, amazing book that I just fell into and still read over and over again.
Excellent. I always love getting book recommendations from the podcast because, there's so many in the world, and, to be able to narrow things down and get to know what inspires the guest, but also things that I could maybe pick up myself.
Yeah, well, if you ask, I would say I'm looking at The Angel of Darkness right now because I was just going to look at the acknowledgments. Since you just moved to a new city that actually occurs in that city, you might want to pick that one up. Caleb Carr, it's fantastic.
Excellent. So, in terms of writing, is that something you did in your younger years as well, and then it just blossomed, or is it something you picked up, just a couple of years back?
I had a great run of teachers in public school in Corpus Christi, Texas, who really helped me hone my skills on creative writing. There was a few in particular that really, when you entered their classrooms, they took away all rules and just said, go and let your creative juices flow. And for better or worse, I actually had somebody sending me some old poems and things that I had published through the school with other students. And I hope those never see the light of day, but it was an exercise in really stretching yourself without rules. And so I would say that I was an aspiring creative writer from early years, but I didn't really take it seriously until I became a professional in something that could pay the bills for me.
Mm. I'm sure in some ways that removed some stress. It allowed you to be able to be creative because then you didn't have to worry about the basics essentially.
I don't know. I kudos to those that do it full time. have enough stress when in my own writing without the worry of a safety net for those basics. But there are some people that are, live, hand to mouth, and are writers, and they eventually make it, and it's amazing, and the stories they have are amazing. But what a journey that is. I mean, my journey, even without going through all of those hardships, was hard enough. So it's pretty fantastic to hear those stories.
Yeah. Yeah. If there's anything from your journey that you'd like to share, that you feel comfortable sharing, whether it's a memorable thing that you've overcome or something that you've struggled with and have, found peace with, is there anything that you'd be willing to share?
Sure. I mean, my the statement that I tell anybody who would ask is, it's this Churchillian, never, never, never give up. Because if you give, I mean, if you give up, then you're going to be a part of a group of 98% of people who have given up. Those that don't give up become the 2% that make it. And it really helps to understand that a lot of times, for me at least, so Scavenger Hunt took me 18 months over 20 years to write. I tried time and time again to get it published. Again, I was trying to do this on the side. And until I got really serious about it and with humility said, well, maybe I do need to go back and really learn how to polish my writing, my creative writing, which is different than my legal writing. It wasn't until that point that I started getting taken seriously. And so it's not just a rite of passage to publication, I would say, and that's what I'm talking about. Of course, you can self-publish and you can, and that's great too. But for those going down the traditional publishing or indie publishing, there is a rite of passage, but that rite of passage actually produces good fruit if you keep diligently going back to your craft and editing it and making sure that it's as tight and as persuasive as it can be. And that was my journey. I go back and I look at my original manuscripts and I understand why they weren't published, right? And then I look at the final and I'm happy with it.
What is one of your favorite parts about the creative process, whether it's from a standpoint of being a lawyer or the standpoint of a writer, and one of your least favorite parts?
One of the most favorite parts of creative writing for me is I can live in a parallel universe with real issues that I deal with. So in Scavenger Hunt, for instance, there's always this tension between national security and privacy. And that's an issue that normally we never on the public square get to fully debate in a meaningful way. And in Scavenger Hunt, I created a universe where, and to be clear, Scavenger Hunt is not meant to have political undertones of one way or the other, but it does put some serious issues on the table. And I create a universe where that plays out in real time. And so I love that because it allows me to express the issues in a way that's real instead of like the talking heads, the things you hear on the news, no matter what news you hear. So I love that about the creative writing process. I also like creating new characters. I was talking about this recently. The thing I don't do well with is really bad criticism. So somebody asked me if I read my reviews, and I said, my publicist sends me the good ones. I started out with Scavenger Hunt. I got a great Publishers Weekly review, and I didn't know how good it was. I didn't understand, and everything out after that was good. I mean, there were some great reviews after that, but then there were some bad ones, and I just remember the bad ones really hurt. There was like somebody was taking a shot at one of my children, and my daughter. She reads Goodreads and she reads all the reviews and she wears it more than I do. So she gets really upset when I have a bad review. So that's, if you're an artist, whether you're painting, whether you're writing, whatever you do in art, you really put yourself out there, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. And even those of us who in their real world have thick skin, like I have in my legal profession, in the artist world, it's much different. It's much more personal.
Yeah. It definitely takes time to build up that suit of armor and to be like, you know what, it's okay good reviews, bad reviews, what is good and what is bad, is, and just thinking about, I just want to make my thing, make my art, make my book, etc., and just do it for yourself and for your own goals. But like, yeah, it's always nice to get the positive validation, but when there's something, a little bit negative or neutral, or you weren't expecting it, yeah, it definitely hurts. Definitely hurts, right?
Scavenger Hunt on the good side, it really changed my professional relationships in a lot of ways. I mean, there are lawyers that I work with for, intelligence, people in the intelligence community, the legal community, the law enforcement community who've read Scavenger Hunt, and that's what they want to talk about. And that's probably the greatest thing and I didn't expect this, is that, I'm chief legal officer of a publicly traded Fortune 500 company. And I thought people would want to talk about, nobody wants to talk about that. They want to talk about Scavenger Hunt. They want to know what happened to Blake Hudson. And one of the greatest things that ever happened to me, I had a board meeting for another company, and I was on the board with somebody who worked at a higher level at the DOJ than I did, and he had read Scavenger Hunt. And he took me in a Suburban from wherever we were back to the main Justice Department, and he walked me through the department, and he said, "That's where Blake did this." And in the book, there's a hidden eighth floor that actually exists that most people in the department don't know exist. And that was really like the basis of a lot of the story. And he was trying to break in. We were both trying to break into the eighth floor, which is now kind of an attic. But I had gotten in years ago. We couldn't get in that day, but just that energy behind that, and somebody who cares that much about my book, that's high level in the department, that was fun.
Yeah, that's nice. And I imagine it's, even though your career is impressive in both realms, it's an icebreaker, and it's fun to be like, I met this author, like.
Yeah, there was an event that I went to right when Scavenger Hunt was getting going through the final part of, about to be printed, and there were three former attorneys general that were at this event, and I knew one of them well, worked with him, and he asked me about my book, and I told him, what I just told you. I said, "It's great, got this eighth floor. Did you know about the eighth floor?" And then to a person, each one of them said, "Well, did you know about the hidden room above the attorney general suite?" And I said, "No, you have to tell me about this." And they said, "Oh yeah, everybody thinks that Marilyn Monroe was close to JFK. Well, she was closer to RFK. And when he was attorney general at the age of 35, she would come see him." And so in the book, I got all the information I could, saw the room, and then in the book called it the Marilyn Monroe suite, or the honeymoon suite, and told them to stop print. I had to put that part of the story in there. So that's in chapter 2 of the book now.
That's really cool. In addition to some of those really neat things that you shared that cross over, you know, in terms of like spaces and people that inspire, and of course your dog, your Great Dane, but what are some unexpected things from your career that crossed over into writing?
Well, I think, we try to separate or divorce ourselves from our characters, but it's hard to do that. And, in my work, we talk a lot about unconscious bias, and anybody who says that that their personality doesn't bleed into their character. So, I mean, my character is changing throughout the writing process is something that, and I think you asked me something that caught me by surprise, but that's something that I didn't expect as a writer. I live in a world where everything is governed by rules and regulations. And so part of the reason I love creative writing is because there are not many rules or regulations, at least before you get to the publisher. But I need a little bit more discipline than complete freedom. So I create a scaffolding for an outline. I usually aim for 2,000 words and 50 chapters. But in my outline of 50 chapters when I began, the last 20 rarely make it, because my characters change the story, and they change over time. And I think, Stephen King said this in On Writing, and I kind of rolled my eyes when I read it. It's kind of artsy, but your characters they have a mind of their own and they change the story. And I said, yeah, that's an artsy thing to say. And then I became a writer, and lo and behold, that's actually happening. So
Yeah.
for Homecoming Queen, for instance, Annika Raven, who's the protagonist, she became more mischievous as the story went on, and I loved it. And I fell in love with her character, and she changed the ending of the book in so many ways. And it's so much better now.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how you think you're writing the story, but it's really the characters? It's like, wait, where's that coming from? You know.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's definitely a fun part of the creative writing process. And I think it's like, maybe some deep subconscious that just seeps into the books when things take a turn, and I love how our minds can get so creative and just come up with the most unique things.
No doubt. I mean, it's constant. And when you're writing a book, a novel in particular, the more that you can focus away from the real world and focus on your book, the more creative it becomes. And that's pretty special. And again, I would not have predicted that, but it certainly works like that, at least for me.
So, having nothing to do with writing for a moment, um, more of a book question, but if you could be any fictional character for a day, who would you be and why?
I think I would want to be Jack Ryan in one of Tom Clancy's novels, because the character in that book was just very well rounded, and a lot like Blake Hudson in my book, had the expertise to actually do the job, but had the humility to know that he really didn't have all the tools that were needed to carry off to overcome the adversity. And so I really like that character a lot, and I grew up reading Tom Clancy and gravitated towards that.
Nice. What are some things you've learned about yourself or your writing process from your first book to your second book, and now as you go into your third book?
The writing constantly improves. So once you think that you've gotten to the standard of writing that is publish worthy and that's going to be your style, it doesn't remain static, and you're constantly learning. So I'm a big believer in my real job of constantly trying to improve the trade craft, whatever that is. And when it comes to writing, it can always improve. And as long as you keep that mindset, I think it just makes you a better writer. I thought that there may be like a plateau of leveling out after book one or two, where I would see kind of a style that just repeated itself. Again, going back to Ludlum, he just kind of had this style that repeated itself. And they do AI now on your writing, and they can tell you what author you resemble.
Hmm.
And when they did that for Scavenger Hunt, it came back as, and I'm sorry, I forgot the person's name, because I've never read the Robert Ludlum posthumous writings from other authors, but it was one of the other authors that was mimicking Robert Ludlum, and that was the closest to my writing style. And then the second time it came around for Homecoming Queen, it was more closely the writing style itself, not just the thriller genre or the story itself, but the writing was more like Michael Crichton. And so it's evolved in a different way. And it's interesting to see that.
If you've been feeling burned out, stressed, overwhelmed, or exhausted, the resources and courses at the Self Care Institute are here to support you. The Self Care Institute was founded by Dr. Ami Kunimura and provides support for individuals and organizations with burnout prevention, burnout recovery, and stress management. I've personally taken a few of these courses and found them to be super helpful, both professionally and personally. The care you give yourself matters just as much as the care you give to others. But if self-care is difficult for you, you're not alone. And the Self-Care Institute is here to support your well-being, resilience, and sense of fulfillment at work and at home. For more information, visit selfcareinstitute.com or go to the show notes and click on the link. What is something that you're looking forward to, not only about Homecoming Queen, your latest, or but also the one that you're cooking up right now?
So, Homecoming Queen is my love song to my hometown, and it is rip-roaring thriller that really is all of the great things that I had on my mind as it relates to not only growing up in South Texas, but it's got hurricanes, it's got good and evil, all sorts of great issues to grapple with interesting characters. Homecoming Queen will probably be a one-off, and the rest of my books, including the one that I'm writing now, will be Scavenger Hunt series. And so, building on Scavenger Hunt, will what I hope to accomplish is to create an audience for my books that really likes what we're doing and loves good stories. And again, my books, they're drawn from the political headlines largely, and hopefully will give readers a behind the scenes look at how things really work.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'm not trying to be political in my books, and I just want the readers to enjoy a great story, and that's what it's all about. I do never want to lose that focus. My third book is some characters that survive in Scavenger Hunt. I won't spoil it. And we're going to be in Chicago this time, dealing with the Chicago Mafia, and it should be it should be a great read.
That sounds really cool. I'll definitely have to dive into that one after I finish Homecoming Queen. I must say, as a person who's lived in Texas for quite a while, I was really excited that you had like a map at the beginning and there was a little thing that said Whataburger. I was like, yes.
So the great thing about writing about your hometown is it doesn't require a whole lot of research, and you kind of know what pushes the local buttons.
Mhm.
But Homecoming Queen really it's a book for anybody from anywhere. But for those from Texas, there will be some hidden gems, and of course, Whataburger is very important to us. Whataburger started in Corpus Christi, Texas, and Miranda, Texas, is largely a takeoff of Corpus, my hometown. And so, yes, there's a significant scene that happens in the book within the Whataburger.
So obviously you've done creative writing, but is there any other creative form that you would like to try, not necessarily professionally, but just for fun that you haven't had a chance to?
Well, I mentioned Churchill earlier, but he used to paint, and I kind of take up painting on rainy days with my children to keep them off video games. And the work that we produce is not something that you can ever put a price tag on. And it doesn't mean because it's priceless, because it wouldn't sell, but it's fantastic. So one of the things that I love to do is I love to take my family overseas when we have a chance. It's a little harder now. I've got people that are in college, but I lost my parents at an early age, and I said I'm gonna go out and see the world because life is short. And so I invested in that, and I always take my kids to museums, and they have these great things where you can go online and you can pick out the most efficient way to get to the things you want to see. And so I'd have my kids pick 3 paintings or 4 paintings, because otherwise little children in museums, not a good thing. But if they've picked out their paintings and they've drawn them in their books, and then they go and then they draw them in real time, they want to stay there forever. And so we've done that, and then we brought that back to the rainy days when we're back home, the rainy weekend days when there's nothing else to do, and we'll just get a canvas, an easel, get some oil paints out, and we'll try our best Van Gogh. And that's fun.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that. I love that. It's such a fantastic thing that you're able to, provide your family the opportunity to see priceless works of art and inspire them. Do you, Are your kids, are they them gonna follow in your footsteps as a lawyer or a writer?
I don't know. We will see. I've learned that trying to manage what they are going to do or what I want them to do often backfires. So we're in the with our fourth child now. We're got to just get limited screen time and a little bit of structure, and go do what you want to do as long as it's nothing silly or foolish. But I think a lot of the things that we do as I'll just say as parents or as influencers for those who don't have children is we give people experiences and or we give people sayings or whatever is important to us, and they don't always unpack it immediately. They pack it away, and then the day will come, whether it's maturity or just the time is right or it's nostalgia, they'll open the box up and they'll unpack it. So a lot of things that I really didn't like to do when I was a kid, particularly growing up with my grandparents who are kind of an older generation, I really enjoy doing now.
Hmm. That's lovely. I'm going to pivot in a different direction with questions, but what is one of your favorite movies and what does it reveal about you?
Well, one of my favorite movies is actually a television series, a 4 episode television series called Lonesome Dove. And what it reveals about me is that I love my home state of Texas. It's the greatest Western, I think, ever written by Larry McMurtry, won the Pulitzer Prize, I think, in the late 80s, 87 maybe. And it became a cult classic of sorts. The movie did. It had Robert Duvall, Tommy Lee Jones as these amazing former captains of the Texas Rangers and just amazing characters and storyline. The movie's 6 hours long. I call it a movie. If you don't treat that as a movie, then second and third, and I love to rank things. So you hit on a nerve here. Ranker. Second is it depends on the day, but it's always either Casablanca or Empire Strikes Back. And so what does that reveal about me? I love Humphrey Bogart, and I just the his acting ability was amazing. And I love good stories. And Casablanca is not a story that I thought I would gravitate to because I'm more like action and thriller, but I can watch that. I've probably watched it 40 times and I hope to watch it another 40 before I die. I love that shit. I love that movie.
That's excellent. Believe it or not, it's one one of many movies actually that I've not had a chance to see yet. So it's on my to-do list.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of the culture that we have in, even back in Looney Tunes days, that if you didn't watch Casablanca, you would be lost on a lot of the references.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Good old Looney Tunes.
I had for my mafia novel coming up, I went back a lot of I watched probably 30 gangster movies and just as a part of, and that's not the only research I've had to do, but just all of it's fascinating to go back and see some of those old gangster movies. But then I remember now why Looney Tunes, it wasn't, I always thought it was hyperbole, Rocky and Muggsy, and it is the gangster characters, but they're not too far away from some of the 1930s and 40s gangster flicks.
Yeah. I do love a good gangster movie. What is it like Goodfellas and the Godfather movies and things like that.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and the other thing that you find is, and I've never worked in the organized crime space, but I've worked with people who have spent a career there, including Michael Chertoff, who helped bring down the 5 families in New York. But when you speak to people who know what they're talking about, they'll say that a lot of the culture of the current mafia is based on Godfather.
That's interesting. Life imitating art, art
Right.
imitating life.
Right. And I'm sure there's a lot that try to imitate the Joe Pesci character in Goodfellas. that's something else.
Yeah, yeah. There was a gangster movie that came out, I want to say about 3 or 4 years ago now, with Robert De Niro. It was The Irishman, I think it was.
Right. That's right.
I actually liked it better than The Godfather, which might be a hot take, but you know.
Yeah, I know it got very good reviews from the artistic community. I'm not sure how it did on Rotten Tomatoes or those things. It's a long movie, so it's an investment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got my eye on that one. I watched it for probably 30 minutes, and I'm not saying it didn't hook me, but I got distracted. I need to go back and look at it. The Chicago Mafia, which is where the third book takes place, Capone did away with the North Side gang when he came to power, but I've resurrected that gang for the purposes of my book. And that's largely an Irish-based gang to the north of the Chicago River. So I definitely need to watch The Irishman.
Yeah, really, really good movie. Another question, not writing related, but since you have had the opportunity to traverse around the world, what was one of your favorite places to visit, and where would you like to travel that you've never been?
Right. So we try as a family to I've always said learn a musical instrument, learn how to play a musical instrument. Always try to get something published, whether you fail or not, and learn a foreign language. So the foreign language that most of us in my family gravitate to is Spanish, which is not surprising given that I grew up near the southern border of the United States. And so I love going to Spanish speaking countries, whether, Argentina or Chile or Spain itself. We've, with younger children, a lot of the places that we've traveled have been, I would say, attraction centric. So it's really easy to go to Rome because there's 10 different things. You can go see the Colosseum. There's so many things you can see there. With Spain, it's more cultural, or with, South America, it's more cultural. And I found that my children gravitated to that as well. They really loved like going into, a store, and I make them speak Spanish as much as they can when they go in, and just going beyond their comfort zone. So any of the Spanish speaking countries we've loved. I really liked Germany, and I love Germany because when you think about the eras of history that changed the world, really the 15th and 16th century was so. I mean, we had the Gutenberg press, we had the Reformation, we had so many big things that happened during that time period that changed the world, and a lot of them happened right there in Germany. And so you get a lot of that flavor. You start at Munich, work your way up through the Lutherstadt, and then go to Berlin. And then when you get into Berlin, I was amazed to see how, on the one hand, the city had hidden all the Nazi Germany paraphernalia, if you will, from sight, but they opened it up within the museums and were very honest about. So the museums are very rich. And then walking through, you really need a tour guide if you're not from the area or familiar with it, to take you to Nuremberg and other places to show you where that evil actually happened. And it's amazing to see, like, they will point to a place that looks just as benign as your neighborhood park, and then they'll put up a photo and they'll show like where Hitler stood behind the podium right there. And that was eerie and again macabre, but also fascinating to me just to be there. So I think Germany, a big surprise. I want to go to Israel, and I've never been, and I had plans to go during COVID and with my family, and they were, luckily for us in terms of finances, because anytime you travel overseas, it's not cheap, but at least not for us. But um, the with six of us, but they closed down faster than anyone else, so we were able to get our money back before COVID. But we never rescheduled that trip, so I look forward to going to Israel one day.
Yeah. So, I was also wondering, what is the biggest, well, back to a writing question. What is the biggest sector of creative writing that you're curious about right now, and how does that bleed into your current writing process?
I don't understand what you mean by sector.
Oh, sure. Like, are you more interested in the research aspect of writing, or are you interested in like making your exposition stronger, or character development, or something like that?
Right. So what I really want to do in terms of getting a collection of books together is I want to take over. I want to be the Department of Justice um, novelist, and I think with Scavenger Hunt, I took a step towards that. There's whether you're talking about Tom Clancy, who's DOD, or Robert Ludlum, which was largely State Department and a little bit of case officer CIA, all of Vince Flynn, all of the different novelists, they have one character that is really from one particular agency or straddles a couple, but there's really not one that's taken over the DOJ space. And there's so much rich material in that space that most of my stories can originate there. And I've already described the building. I have the backing of really the DOJ community for a lot of the community there. So that's what I really hope to do is to establish as a writer kind of that reputation as being the DOJ guy.
That would be really cool. And, obviously, given your background, it makes a lot of sense.
I spent a lot of time. I mean, I joined DOJ when I was 28 years old, and I spent a lot of time late at night kind of walking through the building, wondering, why I ever made it here. And I fell in love with the place. And it means a lot to me that agency gets it right. And so to the extent that I still have, some fingers in writing, at least on the fiction side, in that space, it's important to me. So for
Excellent.
sure.
Wonderful. Well, Chad, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm excited for listeners to get to know you and to pick up your books, which they can do with the links in the show notes. But before we go, anything else you would like to share with the listeners?
Well, I would just say that Homecoming Queen comes out August 6th, and I hope everybody enjoys it. Pick up a copy. And again, you won't regret it, but make sure that you set aside plenty of time, because if I've done my job, then hopefully you won't put it down.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Listeners, please check out the show notes for Chad Boudreaux's links to purchase his books. And as always, thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Like the show? Have a question? Stop by the Facebook and Instagram pages. Links are in the show notes, or search for Creative Piecemeal Podcast on social media and click follow for all the latest.